Good morning, everybody. Hello, my name is Oliver Spark, and I've been asked to chair this important topic this morning around unlocking the power of catalogue marketing. I'm CEO of a business called Suite Analytics. We're a customer marketing analytics platform, but I think I've kind of been asked to be involved today as in a number of roles. I've sent out a lot of catalogues over time. Particularly when I started at the White Company, we were entirely a catalogue business. And I think at one point in my time there, I worked out that once I laid down all my catalogues, I'd been around the world a couple of times. So I have lots of experience of sending catalogues out. But more importantly, I'm joined by two proper experts on the topic. And they will be providing the insight for everyone today, which will then move through. And what we'll do as part of this is we will have a presentation and then we'll come to a question and answer session after about 40 minutes. So usual things, really, really importantly, if you didn't mind, questions in the question box. And as always, we would really love to have those questions. Again, anyone who's tweeting, please use the hashtag DMA events during the piece. And I'll pick up the questions, and I think we'll wait for questions to the end. We won't stop the flow of the presentations, but please do add them in at any point, and I'll be looking to put those to the panel in a moment. And then finally, there will be a recording which we'll send out afterwards. I think it takes a day or two to come, but there will be a recording link sent to everyone if you want to come back to it afterwards. So in terms of our presenters today, we've kindly got Eve Stansell, who is Senior Comms Planner for the Royal Mail Market Reach. Market Reach are the very kind sponsors of today. So I know that everyone's very grateful for their support, and we're particularly, I think, grateful for Eve's expertise in this area, and she will be leading the presentation because she's really developed her massive understanding around this media and then creative strategies through how you use mail. So that will be really, really important. Prior to that, we were just talking before we came on live. Eve worked in government marketing, where she developed the award-winning initiative Change for Life, which we were just talking about, which is hugely important. But I'm told we'll stay off that bit of her history while we concentrate on catalogues for the moment. So, Eve, we really look forward to hearing from you. And Eve's supported by James Knowles. James is head of content innovation for the Retail Week, and particularly their Connect studio, which is a part of it. But Retail Week, and James comes to this with over 13 years as a journalist, working across both consumer and celebrity and lifestyle magazines. So catalogues may sound a bit dry for today compared to your past, James, but particularly that Retail Week insight that everyone gets so often will be a hugely important bit to overlay onto today. So I think with that particular bit done, I think probably it's really important now we just move on to Eve kicking off the presentation. So I'll stop and hand over to you, Eve, at the moment. And then everyone, please, again, reminder, please do put questions in. It makes it so much more interesting to come back to that at the end. So over to you, Eve and James.
Thanks, Oliver. Thank you for the introduction. Whoops. Right. So I am really excited to share the highlights of our catalogue research with you. It demonstrates that there's a really solid role for catalogues in the retail landscape today, both from a brand perspective, so catalogues connect consumers and convert sales, so incredibly powerful sales conversion channel. There will be a link to the full report at the end of the presentation, which you'll be able to access from our website if of interest. And I'd like to kick off with this quote from Miranda Hammond at Sea Salt, which shows the long-term impact of catalogues. So catalogues have a longer impact than digital marketing and deliver on the investment. They're very easy to track performance, to understand what's working and what's not. So that speaks to the heart of being able to evaluate the effectiveness of your catalogues. So our powerful partnership. So we were fortunate to work with significant experts in the research space, Illuminas, who are an independent research agency. So we worked with them to develop a robust methodology, quantitative and qualitative research. And they looked at consumers and brands' attitudes and behaviors to catalogues. Within that brand expert panel, we had catalogue designers and printers, so really robust view of the market. And then worked with Retail Week, who are obviously the retail experts and brought the retail point of view. So we had a really, really clear, powerful report based on consumers and how brands and retailers deploy catalogues to make a success. And so the 4 proof points. So these are the killer insights. If you remember one slide, this is the key one today. Catalogues have evolved to do more. So we looked at catalogues back in 2017 from a research perspective. So that's 5 or 6 years ago. And we wanted to look at how far the channel has come since the boom in online shopping, particularly since the pandemic. And our evidence shows that catalogues drive online shopping. They're more impactful than they were 5 or 6 years ago, and they make browsers buyers. So second important insight is they connect consumers with brands. There's a powerful brand building channel for e-commerce and omni-channel, and there's a positive emotion associated with reading catalogues. There's also a future focus to catalogues. So what we did here was look at innovation, technology, and touched on sustainability. And then finally, success across the sectors and seasons. So a look at fashion, food and drink categories within the retail sector, and also a view of Christmas. So how successful Christmas catalogues can drive sales. So catalogues have evolved. So this is the first insight. You may remember the Argos catalogues and the Next directories from several years ago, the big books. So the coffee table catalogues that would sit there and generate discussion within the household, and they were quite chunky. However, now what we've seen is a trend towards catalogue edits, so more streamlined format, which is designed to excite and drive people online. And that's mostly because the website exists. So instead of having the entire product range in print format on your coffee table, you go online and you have a look there. So this ideally is meant to drive you in that journey, in that direction. So the catalogues now are edits of the range online. They're well designed and high quality, with 64% saying they're very high quality or fairly high quality. And they're also easy to navigate. And from the research, people were saying they sort of remind me of social media, you know, with a story around the product brings it to life. And there's a lot of editorial content now. And you can see the effectiveness of this. So as a result of these more streamlined catalogues, 2 in 3 people are visiting the brand website after receiving a catalogue, which is a really powerful statistic. And we've got this supported by Gary Howard from Precision, who says, if you Google something, you already know what you were looking for, but print can sell you something you didn't know you wanted yet, which is absolutely key to retail. So it's that inspiration piece that catalogues bring to the recipient. And looking at where we were then versus where we are now, so catalogues do more now. In terms of the statistics, they live longer in the home than they did in 5 or 6 years ago in 2017. We've seen a significant uplift of 7%. So catalogues, 45% of catalogues were kept in the home for more than a week versus 5, 6 years ago. And there's been an uplift with the digital. So this is a really powerful outtake. As far as 15% go online now in comparison to 2017. So there's more digital traffic and engagement following receipt of a catalogue. And that's because the channels work really well together and they're complementary. and also purchase. So the key one for retailers, obviously the purchase is integral. 55% bought something that they saw in a catalogue in the last year. And it drives more inspiration, with 76% saying catalogues give them ideas for things to buy. So our next insight is the brand engagement and the connection with consumers. So catalogues connect consumers with brands. Majestic use catalogues as a key brand piece. So they're able to personalize the content, expand on the key Majestic brand propositions, give details on the wines, the winemakers, their storytelling, the grape varieties. It's just all evocative of what they sell and their range of wine, and showcase key events at times of the year, something that they couldn't bring to life in another channel. They are hard to ignore. So 45% of people say they're more likely to notice a brochure or catalogue sent in the post than a marketing email. And while digital has its place, it's very task orientated. So messages can be easily ignored, whereas print occupies a physical place in our homes. So the high emotional engagement that comes from catalogues, you can see a beautiful catalogue here from Liberty. We've got the QR code at the bottom, really engaging copy as far as feast your eyes, sugary delights to indulge in the season. It just sort of pops off the page. 60% of people say they enjoy sitting down with catalogues and reading them in their own time. And 48% feel that a catalogue is a way to escape from the world and unplug from a lot of screen time. So it's really relaxing experience and positive association with a media channel. So moving on to the future focus for catalogues and looking at tech and innovation and future audiences. From page to possibility. So in homewares, what we saw from the research is AR has taken off. So catalogues are being used to direct shoppers via AR to online experiences where they can visualize in their home. So in this example of a sofa, being able to customize the color and being able to imagine how this looks in reality within your living space. And this is really powerful. So it bridges that imagination gap and could potentially have an impact on the sustainability challenges around reordering, returning. So if you're able to imagine something that's true to real life in your home, you're less likely to return it, which has a positive environmental impact. So 57% say AR is appealing in a catalogue, and that's the ability to use your phone to capture how a product might look on you or in your home. So looking ahead in terms of tech, visual recognition. So we've seen examples here from Very, whereby in the top right-hand corner, you hold your phone, you don't need to scan a QR code, and the software in your phone just picks up what that image is and directs you direct to the website without having to download apps or type in URLs. So it's becoming more easily recognizable. And we've got things like CamFind and Google Lens, whereby you're able to just lift your phone up to an object or a piece of print and taking you directly to where you can buy it online. And a more sustainable future. So from the research, people were saying that all shopping is bad for the planet and it's recognized as a necessary evil. So how does paper and print fit in? Well, this was felt to be less of a concern because the focus was more on plastic, packaging and unnecessary returns and reordering of items. So it's more about the life cycle of the shopping, which is unfortunately, wasteful. And there was a recognition that paper is regenerative because it comes from trees, and most catalogues are recyclable. And we're doing a lot of innovation in this space in terms of looking at more sustainable print and more sustainable mail. And I'll be able to give more information on that later in the presentation. So over to James.
Thanks for that, Eve. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Oliver, for the introduction before that. So as Eve mentioned, Retail Week partnered with Market Reach on this insight report, Catalogue, connecting with consumers, converting sales. I know that Eve's going to send it. Market Reach will send it out to you, but it is also available on the Retail Week website. If you scroll down to our report store on the homepage, you'll find it there. It's ungated, it's not subscriber content, so anyone can read it. And I really recommend that you do, because as well as really interesting insights from Illuminous and all of the consumer research they did, which was some 3,000 plus consumers, it also features commentary from leading retailers such as Matalan, ProCook, Sea Salt, The White Company, Majestic Wine, Go Outdoors, and other market experts, including Eve, who we're hearing from today. So the report also looks in depth at how retailers that invest in catalogues performed at Christmas time 2022. So I'm going to talk a bit about that, and then I'm going to move on to how the different sectors are using catalogue and direct mail to establish, build, and strengthen relationships with their consumers. So you would have expected, and you'd have been fair to do so, that the Christmas 2022 would be a bit of a washout, considering the macroeconomic environment. But despite the dire state of the general economy, many retailers had a positive trading period. Several even exceeded rather downbeat expectations, and in some cases, such as Next, actually posted profit increases. For example, we saw in grocery, Marks and Spencer's had its highest Christmas sales ever of 80 million, and Lidl attracted 1.3 million new food customers. So it was a positive picture for many. But if we look specifically at some of the retailers that produce catalogues and that I just mentioned previously, Majestic Wine reported a rise in sales of 21.1% over the 8 weeks to December 26th. And that's compared to pre-COVID 2019 levels, and achieving record market share for them. Hotel Chocolat reported 10% like-for-like sales increase in the 9 weeks to Christmas Day. And then in fashion, for example, Sea Salt sales across shops, online and marketplaces were up by 15%. So really good results there across the board. Despite the cost of living crisis, there was a sense that there was a sort of triple whammy of opportunity wrapped up in Black Friday, the World Cup, and what was really the first proper Christmas since COVID hit. And combining marketing and messaging was a good way to kick off that period. So, for example, Aldi released its Feast of Football advert with football-themed characters such as Ronaldo. You see what they did there, Macaroni, Maradona, and Roy Bean, alongside its Christmas character Kevin the Carrot. And that World Cup and Christmas theme was carried through into its special buy catalogues as well. However, clearly this year is still going to be pretty dicey for retail. I think it's fair to say. So retail marketers are going to need to use every tool in their toolbox to make sure they stay on top. And that's really going to require clever tactics for the 12 years ahead, with a range of marketing levers to pull on. As we've seen from the success stories of the Christmas period from the likes of Hotel Chocolat and Sea Salt that I just mentioned, catalogue marketing can really help brands remain front of mind for consumers and nurture those good relationships and help them maintain growth. And clearly at Christmas, as we all know, that's the time when catalogues reach peak efficacy. Perhaps they remind consumers of days gone by when the toy catalogue marked the start of the Christmas period. I know it does for me. So beyond this trading snapshot, there were some key trends evident, which you see on this slide here. So firstly, striking the right tone and messaging was critical, particularly in relation to the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing right now. So Robert Dyers, for example, showed empathy with consumers by labelling its festive catalogue Cut the Cost This Christmas, which played into the discount and value demands of UK shoppers last year and obviously into this year. Secondly, showing personality is also important. It's a competitive market. So you can see on this slide, there's some examples from Loaf in its Christmas brochure, which really played on the nostalgia of Christmases gone by with cute word plays on festive themes. deck the walls, for example, and even a word search puzzle. So, you know, something for the reader to do. Thirdly, and Eve has touched on this already quite a lot, but innovation was also key to connect with digital channels. So, for example, Liberty included QR codes to take customers to products on its website, and there they could see more images and the product information, and used really beautiful photo shoots to really make sure the items were enhanced in detail and provided really curated gift guides. Argos obviously doesn't have its sort of regular catalogue anymore, but still has its Christmas gift guide. And they also use QR codes to take consumers to videos of the products, and also included discounts and vouchers to engage browsers. So if we look at the sectors now, the report also takes a deep dive into how different sectors are using catalogues. So the Illuminous research actually reveals the top sectors using the medium. So, for example, when asked what type of catalogues they receive, 34% of consumers surveyed said they receive fashion catalogues. So, number one, 22% receive home/DIY and garden catalogues, and 11% receive food and drink catalogues. So I've picked two to talk through today, which is fashion and then food and drink. So fashion, and you can see the slide here, is obviously a category that, you know, it's a traditional heartland of catalogues. It really lends itself to the medium with beautiful imagery and that type of thing. And, you know, fashion retailers have traditionally used it as a channel to really drive engagement and sales by providing the consumer with inspiration and a way to introduce new and exciting products. So you'll see from this slide, fashion catalogues really do drive immediate interaction. So 43% of consumers that receive one act upon it, 22% go to the website, 10% speak to family and friends about it, 10% conduct a search online, and 7% go to visit a physical store. In this category, things like offers are really important. Obviously, even more so now during the challenging economic environment. So that's something to bear in mind. You know, we see retailers like Matalan that feature things like promotions quite prominently, and its loyalty scheme. So they're a retailer that's really kind of conscious of the environment that we're experiencing at the moment. Catalogues that include editorial supporting brand stories are also really impactful for target customers. So women's retailer Sosandar, for example, produces a glossy A5 publication of 75 pages showcasing its latest looks and style advice. But as Eve alluded to before, catalogues of fewer than 50 pages are more common, with 1 in 4 including a discount code. And 39% of them should typically come from brands the consumer already buys from. So they are clearly a great loyalty tool. 83%, really hitting you with all the stats, 83% of fashion catalogues are looked at immediately or kept to look at another time, while 2/3 of them stay at home, in the home for at least a week, and they're looked at 11 minutes on average, and 23% actually lead to a purchase. So there's a lot of evidence there to sort of back them up as a real sales driver. And yeah, so as I said, they've got smaller, they're more magalog now in design, so a bit more kind of conceptual, I suppose. But let's talk about some of the examples. So fashion and homeware retailers, Joe Brown's has big plans. So it's aiming to reach 100 million revenue by 2026. Lofty ambition, but they seem to be on the way there. And that'll be up from 39.1 million in its financial accounts for up to June 30th, 2021. It started as a catalogue business, and this remains the core driver of sales. Now it has become a multi-channel business. So for its autumn-winter 2021 campaign, it expanded its homeware range and felt that it was a powerful hook to attract new customers to the brand. You know, we've seen a lot of retailers diversifying, so that's no great surprise. But the aim of that campaign was to reach new and current audiences by communicating the new range without cannibalizing its traditional fashion pull. So for this launch, it added 24 extra pages, and the heavier 148-page catalogue displayed all the usual fashion elements. It gave maximum exposure to the new homewares range as well. And the results speak for themselves. So overall response rates were up by 32% compared to the autumn-winter 2019 campaign. And responses from new customers were higher than the best performing lists of spring/summer 2021, while average order values increased on 2020 levels. So really good results there. The White Company is another great example. So catalogues and brochures have always been a critical part of its marketing strategy. Something Chief Creative Officer Mark Winstanley told Retail Week is a key part of the brand's heritage. So he told us that even to this day, they still make up a significant proportion of the retailer's communication and marketing mix, and prove to be especially popular with the retailer's long-standing customers. He added that the rising interest in shopping online hasn't really negatively impacted the medium, as you might have expected. Rather, he said the role has just evolved slightly now, and that it's a complementary channel that sits alongside its, beautiful stores and its website, and they all kind of coexist in a sort of ecosystem. So he also added that, it provides a sort of 360-degree shopping experience for the customers, which for a retailer like the White Company, you can see why that's really important. And then lastly, Cecil, they send catalogues to customers to share new collections, partnerships and product stories. And they also send postcards and smaller mail, actually, for special events and occasions. And we also spoke to their senior customer relationship manager, Miranda Hammond, and she told us that, not all consumers are obviously digitally engaged or that savvy at using digital channels. So the catalogue is an important part of the marketing mix to help them reach those consumers. And she also said, which is again backed up in the Illuminous research, that catalogues, they sit around in our homes for much longer. We tend to keep them, and therefore, there's a lot more visibility. So they really do deliver on the investment. And Cecil, again, like we've spoken with the other examples, they have really been blurring the lines. So they do include QR codes and things like that to make it easier for the customers to go to the website and see more digital content on the products that they might be considering buying. So now let's turn to food and drink. So during the pandemic, obviously food and drink was one of the key category that continued to perform really strongly, and consumers began seeking out other options, often because they had to, for food and drink deliveries and subscriptions and that kind of thing, often for the first time. And of course, during the pandemic, as we all know, businesses pivoted their models very quickly. And mailed catalogues were a convenient way for retailers to reach consumers who are at home, again, particularly those who might not be as digitally savvy, during the lockdowns. And for many, this has remained a viable part of their offer, even post pandemic. And we can see that, like fashion, food and drink catalogues on this slide have, really tangible impacts on the way the consumer behaves. So 51% that receive a catalogue do something as a result. 17% head to the website, 13% speak to family and friends, 10% search online, and 15% visit a physical store. Interestingly, if you compare those stats to the fashion, greater numbers head to the store, whereas for fashion, greater numbers head online. So a bit of an interesting difference in behavior between those two sectors. More than 1 in 4 food and drink catalogues include a special offer, and food vouchers are also common. And much like fashion, 70% of the catalogues are kept and looked at, more than once. Over half of them stay in the home for at least a week. And, they have a sort of 6-minute dwell time, as you will. And much like fashion, again, 22% lead to a purchase. So as I said earlier, in this sort of more, difficult economy, that's a pretty compelling stat for a marketing channel. So we've pulled out an example in Hotel Chocolat, where its catalogue provides a real sweet spot for its customers. The pun is intended, clearly. The chocolate retailer's Christmas 2021 marketing was a prime example of how retailers can use a catalogue campaign to maximum effect. So Kantar data showed the chocolatier's catalogue scored in the top 2% of all UK ads on persuasiveness. Pretty impressive stats, which really does prove the ability of direct mail to drive long-term brand building. So the 8-page catalogue targeted existing customers and was particularly effective amongst this audience. So I'm going to hit you with some stats now because they're all very impressive. But Kantar's data found 90% of customers would use the coupon, 95% would visit the brand's website, 90% would visit the store, and 90% would talk to their friends and family about the brand. 72% found the catalogue very interesting, and 81% chose "I love it" from a 6-point rating scale. So lots of positive association with the brand as a result of the catalogue. And then you'll also see a quote from Lynn Deason at Kantar talking about how Hotel Chocolat has created, a really compelling catalogue that, the consumer loves, basically. So what we've seen here is some key examples of sectors about how retailers of all shapes, sizes, and descriptions can use catalogues to really strengthen existing relationships, win new customers, deepen relationships, and ultimately convert sales. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass back to Eve now.
Thanks, James. Thank you for that. A really in-depth view of how effective catalogues are across different retail categories. So for those who are considering catalogues in your marketing strategy, a summary of today. So the 4 salient points and key insights. Catalogues have evolved to do more. They connect consumers with brands. They're future focused. And there is success across sectors and seasons. So if you are interested in planning your 2023 catalogue activity, you could speak to us at Market Reach and start thinking about your activity now in terms of seasonal peaks such as summer, Black Friday and Christmas, certainly later in the year. Market Reach are available to explore what competitor brands are doing in this space. We could help you guide and optimize your creative approach with eye tracking software, discuss, test and learn, access best practice case studies, and also share more about sustainable mail. So we've developed a guide, which you'll see here, using mail more sustainably. And if you hold your phone up to the screen, that QR code should take you directly to our page where you can download the guide. And that can give you really good hints and tips on how to make your mail campaigns more sustainable with different types of materials and also best practice. So just to end the presentation today, this really powerful quote from Wool Lovers on how catalogues transform their business. So when they came in, this management team, the business was insolvent. And one of the first things they did was to get back to cataloguing and send them regularly to all our customers. Catalogues have been key to delivering the growth we have seen and continue to see with our brands. So I'd like to thank you for your time. That concludes the presentation. And we've got a good chunk of time for questions now. But for those who are interested in the full report, here is the link to our website, so you'll be able to download it. And yeah, that's everything. So open up to questions.
Thanks, Eve and James. Thank you so much for that. I mean, Eve, thank you for so many amazing insights from your side, and James, just great to see that sort of depth of research and feedback from the real users of Catalogue. I was White Company myself once upon a time, and I know how fundamental Catalogue has been to their strategy, throughout all the years. And I think the real point for me that comes out of that is, I was way there back in the days when I think the internet even didn't exist. I did the first website, but to find now with multiple shops, obviously huge online presence, how important Catalogue still is in the marketing mix. So lots of, I felt really deep insights there. We're going to kick off with a question from Oscar, which actually I think really is a really important thing that I wanted to sort of kick off as a discussion, which is really around the role of Catalogue in terms of acquisition and retention. And obviously for most brands, that's such a key understanding, that key difference is so important. So perhaps, Eve, if we start with you on that particular question, and perhaps just talk about that relationship and the different techniques perhaps that people can use in terms of retention and acquisition.
So the question around whether catalogues are effective for both. Well, the research certainly, so when we looked at this, 25% of the research was focused on acquisition and 75% was retention. So catalogues are still being used for acquisition, and they are powerful in terms of generating response and interest. They are very effective for retention in fashion, as James mentioned earlier. And I think there was an element to that question around education as well, and whether you could use them for the education sector. And yes, they can be, because the principles, even though this report is focused on retail, the principles of being able to read something in print and going online to find out more still exist. So yes, incredibly powerful for acquisition. I mean, we have our data team who are able to sort of look at that further. And then retention, I mean, from the brand metrics, and you've seen that in the presentation around connecting consumers, connecting customers, the loyalty aspect, and customers are often reminded of the brand because they receive the catalogue. So there's a really rich piece there for loyalty.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting, that particular piece around the loyalty and some of those dwell times and things like that. James, do you have a comment just to add to that? Any highlight you want to bring out around that point? And then Eve, I'll come back to you and just ask one more question around that acquisition piece, because I think it's so key for so many brands. But James, got comments from yourself?
Well, I'd probably pick up on the loyalty element of what was just said, in the sense that it's such a competitive market now, and so many consumers have become more used to using digital channels, for example. I know that it's the level of digital penetration of retail sales has fallen to something like 27%, which is down from the highs of sort of around about 38% we saw at the height of the pandemic, but still much higher than the 19% pre-pandemic. So that also means competition has gone up online a lot too. So all retailers that sell online, for example, are in a much more competitive marketplace. So if you add that to a difficult economy, consumers struggling with this cost of living crisis, that really highlights why retail marketers need every possible lever that they can access to drive loyalty. And the catalogue is highlighted in the Illuminous research. It is a loyalty driver, and if you can deepen relationships and bring people closer to the brand, then that is certainly something that is going to add to a successful strategy for a retailer.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. So you've come back to the sort of acquisition part of it, and I'm just make sure that everyone, the term cold lists means is clear to everyone listening. So cold lists are when you're purely going to data that you don't own, so it's non-owned data. It obviously, in my own background, it's been a hugely important part of an acquisition strategy. Do you have any insights into the role of cold lists and the current performance of cold lists at the moment?
No sort of hard statistics around it, but I know that in terms of, it's not just cold lists in terms of acquisition, but you could look to reactivate customers or people who have lapsed, or look at lookalikes and target accordingly. So, but yeah, in terms of success rates, there are obviously GDPR has changed that landscape in terms of being able to buy lists and you have to get permission, don't you? So there have been changes around that, but then there is evidence that new GDPR legislation is coming in, so that will change the landscape again.
Yeah, I think from my own observation, and we at Sweet work with lots of brands who mail catalogues, and I think my own view is we probably have seen a slight drop off of use of cold lists as a methodology, but by the same token, we're also seeing great success with people still recruiting. And I think it is really important always to have that really clear understanding of where your new customers are coming from. And I certainly think I've seen it in my own views, just how important that part of it is in terms of the acquisition piece. James, do you have any final points on that? And then a couple of other questions I'll jump on to next, if anything to add there.
I think you both covered it off pretty well, actually. I mean, obviously, acquiring new customers is essential, really. And I think that, we see more and more consumers discovery of new brands and retailers is really important. And I think that catalogs and, cold lists, or however it is they get these communications, I certainly personally have discovered new brands and retailers that way. So I think it can be a great tool.
Yeah, I think so. I think that perhaps leads on to a question from James, really about sort of different types of catalogue. And I think this is probably came back out of your research, probably, James, first. So why don't I ask you to just give your views on that bit about pure product catalogues, compared to the sort of, I think there was a phrase called Magalog at one point, but the advice magazine formats, and how the sort of, what you're seeing in terms of, that sort of split, perhaps. Was there anything in the research around that?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, we spoke to a range of different retailers. One of the general trends that we see, and I know that Eve would have seen this too, is that we all remember the big catalogs of old, the big Argos catalog. I mean, I personally remember furiously circling things for my parents to buy back in the day. But people are more conscious of the sustainability question, which is something Eve touched upon. So you could see it as a reaction to that. But I guess we certainly have seen a slight slimming down of the catalogue. So the average number of pages seems to be fewer than they once were. And they have to obviously be sector relevant. So for fashion, for example, the fashion consumer does expect something that isn't simply a presentation of all our products. They want something that's a curated edit, something that shows the best of what the brand has to offer, something that makes them feel like part of the brand just by reading it and sitting down with it with a cup of tea and enjoying it. Then I suppose you've got your kind of, your perhaps less experiential categories, maybe, some food retailers and that type of thing, where actually you need to see a greater volume of products and that type of thing. So in the retailers we looked at, there was a range of different catalogue sizes, and then also some smaller mailing type options that I mentioned as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Eve, anything you would like to add to that?
Yes, just in terms of talking about the older sort of style, and I think some of you may remember mail order, which involved you actually returning a form with your catalogue order, and so that was the entire product range.
Eve, there's no one old enough to remember that.
So being able to send your form back via post, ticking all the boxes in terms of what you want delivered. So we've obviously seen that evolve quite significantly as people are ordering online. But I echo what James says around more editorial in terms of like the Boden catalogues, for example, which weren't covered in this research, but we have looked at before. Just the storytelling, blending that, the brand story and the range, and sort of a hint of the range as opposed to the entire range. And there has been that change as we've covered in the research.
That's good. I'm going to come, James Clark, I'm going to come back to a little bit more of your questions in a second, but I think Laura's in the chat has asked an interesting question around the Screwfix catalogue, which I was almost going to quote as one of the sort of the product catalogues of all time. I think in terms of my own views when that question came in. I personally don't have any insights into the Screwfix situation. Eve, do you or James have anything to add to that question?
So the question is,
Screwfix is as I think, I would have given it as a top example of a product-led catalogue, and then Laura's highlighting that they've pulled it, and I don't personally have any insights into that. I don't know if either of you do.
I know that we have a case study of Screwfix, so I wasn't aware that they had pulled it per se. So we have quite a relevant recent case study of the work that they do. What they may have done was perhaps downsize and perhaps decide to send sort of more direct mail as opposed to a catalogue. So that often, there's test and learn, and there are different times of the year where, for example, Argos, they took their catalogue, their big catalogue, they went away, but they came back and they did something smaller at Christmas. So something cut down, 12-page catalogue. So we've seen different iterations of that. So that could possibly be what's happened there.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, James, you go. Sorry.
Yeah, I would add to that. It's with all of these marketing channels, you all see a bit of give and take, don't you? So you mentioned Argos. There's also IKEA as well that kind of pulled away from it. But then some of the retailers I mentioned, like Sosandar, for example, are newer businesses that do have catalogues and see the value in them. So I also don't know why Screwfix pulled their catalogue exactly. So apologies for that, Laura. Perhaps we'll try and find out. But I imagine it's because they've done some research around their consumer base and looked at their behaviour and that type of thing. Perhaps they behave differently to a Sosandar customer, different product category, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any great insight. I do know the designer of it, so afterwards I'll see if I can find out an answer. I think my age-old belief has always been around multi-channel, which Screwfix obviously have a lot of stores, and but the catalogue has always had an important role, and you highlighted that, James, in terms of driving to stores. So I think it's an interesting. It'd be an interesting insight to get. Maybe that's one for your next research piece, James, to try and find out that. Mm-hmm. So just going back to another part of the questions that James from CJ Wildbird Foods asked was really around the personalization aspect of it. And I didn't know, again, whether either of you had real comments around the investment that normally goes along with personalization and the value of that.
I could certainly answer personalization so we looked at one of the travel brands, so it wasn't in this report, but as part of the wider research with Illuminas, one of the travel brands are doing almost catalogues on demand. So where you based on previous destinations and your interest, completing an online questionnaire around where you want to go, they serve up personalized content suggesting destinations for the next, for that foreseeable that year of travel. So if you're interested, if you've been here, then you're more likely to go here. So it's based on propensity modeling. And they have had a lot of success with that, particularly in the travel sector. We have seen there are fully personalized catalogues. There was a French company who were doing that. I think they were called New Kick, whereby everything is based on data. But it really depends on what the audience are willing to share as well. So there's that value exchange if they want that. And from the research, the stat was compelling. It was 61%, which I've remembered, want personalized catalogues. So there is an appetite there for catalogues. And they are effective, provided that there's a balance between, too much information and not enough. So there is a tipping point.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, I think that 61% stat is interesting. I always think, because we do a lot of consumer surveys and that type of thing at Retail Week, I always think there's a gap between what consumers say they want and how they actually behave. And I wonder, because I often hear retailers debating, the merits of different levels of personalization, and you often hear about the holy grail getting down to the individual level. But a lot of retailers have said to me that actually, they generally talk about it online, but it obviously applies to catalogs too. But a lot of retailers say to me that getting down to the individual level isn't the holy grail, actually, because customers tend to act in kind of groups. So if you're the kind of retailer that has broad spectrum of customers, really you need to use the data you hold on them and the behavioral data to sort of put them into buckets, as it were. So I'd imagine if you're a brand like, for example, I mentioned them a few times, but Sosandar, or one of the kind of smaller brands that has a very defined consumer, I wonder how much they need to be really personalized for that consumer. I think that type of, or maybe a white company customer, for example, they all have, you'd imagine, quite similar wants. I would imagine the more useful way to personalize those types of things are things like, maybe a personalized discount around their birthday or something like that. But that's my personal opinion.
Right, good. I thought we were always going to get you as a consumer adding into your views in there, James. I think James Clark, to respond to my own experience of that, is clearly there is value in personalisation, and that it could be a simple A/B test of a front cover or something like that, and taking a guess at your market. I suspect there's some slightly different range of consumer. I just as a personal view, I think you can get over focused around micro segmentation and not learn enough. So I think I'm always trying to keep personalization, particularly in that mail order, into pretty tight tests that you really think you're going to learn something rather than masses of micro things. But there are a number of products now also that use direct mail as part of the customer journey at different points, and that really is getting really granular, really personalized. So maybe your abandoned cart series, someone hasn't responded for X days, you can now get into triggers at real micro level. But I think on the broader piece, I think it's a really interesting question. I think we're probably all slightly going into personal experience and views on it, but I've never been a huge fan of having such micro personalization that you don't actually I've always forgotten how to learn anything out of it, but that's maybe my own views.
I think just to add to that, I think there is a difference between personalization and relevance. So relevance is the most important aspect, that the audience finds the message relevant and they relate to it. So you're using data insight to develop that. Whereas personalization, I think, has a slight negative sort of edge to it, because it implies your name slapped across every aspect of the communication. So there is a difference there.
Right. Good, James. I'm glad to see we're in the same camp. So that's good news, all of us. Time's running out, and we haven't tackled one of the sort of important questions that was brought up, which was around sustainability. In your background, you've obviously got lots of experience on this. I don't want to feel too rushed on such an important topic, but would you perhaps just quickly touch on that? And it is obviously a big question that comes up around direct mail.
So was the question around how sustainable the channel is?
Yes, there was an earlier question around, particularly about carbon footprints and things like that. So maybe just give a quick summary of how it works and views on that.
Well, I mean, if you look at carbon impact as one area of it, obviously all media has an impact. And there's been a lot of greenwashing out there around, go green, go paperless sort of thing. And it's not true, because every channel has a media impact, from server hot houses to, physical impact. So that's something to think about when you're doing a kind of a like for like comparison. But from our perspective, it's about circularity. So we're investing in this, and we've got a campaign launching in a few months around circularity of print, and looking at the life cycle. So what that involves across the supplier chain. So it's the paper, start of life, and then you've obviously got all the elements that go into it, from ink. It's everything down to recycling, end of life, and what that means from a regenerative perspective. So it's taking a much broader view from an environmental side. But also, if people are interested in learning more, we've got our sustainability guide, which looks at things like more sustainable materials and inks, and potato starch wrappings for catalogues. So poly wraps have been phased out to a large degree. You could do naked wraps, which implies just a recyclable kind of band around the catalogue. The National Trust have done this. So there are different ways of trying more sustainable materials. But as an organisation, we're looking at sort of the wider impact as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. That was obviously a really useful summary. We're getting very close to time, but just before we do, James, do you have any, because I'm sure the consumer research has some important points there. Could you give a quick view there yourself?
Well, we do lots of research at Retail Week around sustainability. We produce a yearly sustainability report and launched an event on the topic last year. And it's such an important area for retailers, one that they're all struggling with and trying to grapple with, and trying to offset this, that, and the other. And I don't think anyone's quite there yet, but absolutely when it comes to channels, including catalogues, it's something that they have to bear in mind. But I think we've really seen that in the reduction as well of the pagination of catalogues and that kind of thing, and not only the pagination, the page size and stuff like that. So there's definitely some movement there.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic, and I always think it's so unfair when sometimes things are more visibly easy to see what the impact may be. I'm sure everyone saw the panorama around data centers and the impact of those on all sorts of things. So no channel is free, I think, is probably one of the conclusions. But yeah, I'm sure. Sorry, it was an earlier question. I'm sure it's an important topic, but I think that's really helpful to have those insights from you both. So I suppose just as we're sort of drawing to a close almost, everyone always, I think, likes to have a few key takeouts out of a talk like this. So Eve, if I come to you for that at the beginning, would you mind just highlighting your key takeouts?
Absolutely. So from my side, catalogues, the evolution has been the most powerful key outtake from this piece of research. So catalogues are driving people online more and driving shoppers online to buy. So that 15% uplift versus 5 years ago, that 2 in 3 people go online after receiving a catalogue. I mean, that is a really powerful metric. And then they're actually converting. So the 55% who go on to buy. So if there's one thing you need to think about or remember, it's that kind of purchase journey and the role that catalogues are playing, and sometimes might not even be aware that they are driving that much value.
Okay, great. Thank you. And James?
Yeah, similar. So I think it's important to consider the life cycle of a catalogue. If you think about your own home, you'll have 1, 2, maybe 3, and they hang around for a lot longer compared to, say, a digital ad, which there's a lot of noise online to cut through. So I think if you do have a catalogue or you're planning to invest in one, it really needs to tell the brand story and be a showcase for the brand, because that is going to ultimately help make sure that you're front of mind when they're thinking about purchasing. And as Eve said, if you look at the conversion, I touched on it in the fashion and food categories, it's 23-24%, I think. In the current economic climate, I think retailers, as I said, need to be putting on any levers they can to try and get customers spending.
I think that is the key point in this, and I know I see from my own. We at Sweet work with a number of brands, over 100 brands, and direct mail is still on the agenda for a vast proportion of those. And we see many growing brands still using direct mail as their part of their marketing mix for driving growth. So I personally found it really helpful and useful to be given such a good summary and overview of the market. So I'd just like to close by, first of all, thanking Eve and James for their time, particularly to Market Reach for sponsoring the event, which was, I think, hugely helpful. James, for you and your team, really working on Retail Week, doing such really great insight and research. So I think it really gives a validity to people's conclusions around where catalogue fits in. So I think just final point from a DMA perspective, again, thank you for hosting. And I know they always are very grateful for any feedback and rating around events. So that would be very helpful if anyone managed to do that. So I think almost to time precisely, we're closing at 11 o'clock. I thank everyone for coming along. And as I think we said previously, a copy of the presentation and probably a recording will be circulated following the event. So thank you very much for everyone who attended. Thank you for questions. And most importantly, James and Eve, thank you for presenting so clearly on this important topic.